for Zollotech, and I've been using the 8 and 8 Plus since they came out. In fact, the 8 Plus is my go-to phone. I've used it every single day, all day long, and I've come up with some good things and some bad things about them. I'm going to focus more on the iPhone 8 Plus since that's my go-to phone, but know that the iPhone 8 is basically the same minus the smaller screen, of course, the smaller battery, and the lack of dual cameras. Everything else is the same. So let's get started with what's good, and then we'll move on to the negative things about the 8 Plus or the 8. The first good thing about the iPhone 8 Plus is its display. It's still 1080p, but this time it has what Apple calls True Tone, which adjusts to the outside environment or inside. We're in full bright light, and it looks great, and you can see it looks pretty natural and pretty legible in this sort of light. True Tone is something you have to see to appreciate. When you turn it off, the screen becomes more blue and less natural. When you turn True Tone back on, it takes that blue out and adjusts for the ambient light so that it looks more like natural paper. The second positive is the camera. The camera retains the 1x and 2x lenses, but the actual sensor is a little bit different. There's still 12 megapixels, and we have dual camera lenses in the iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 10 when that comes out. However, it's got deeper pixels and larger pixels to pick up lower light. Now, I took a bunch of photos and video to give you an idea of what the camera can actually do. So let's take a look at that now. So I took this picture with my iPhone 8 Plus. The portrait modes are only available on the 8 Plus and the iPhone 10, the different modes. They use the A11 Bionic processor to basically determine what it should look like using artificial intelligence. So if I turn it to stage light mono, you can see it looks a little bit different, and it's pretty sharp, but it sometimes is a little screwy around the edges. It gets really muddy there. But it's a neat feature that it's in beta and should get better from now on. I'm recording with the iPhone 8 Plus, and we're using the 1x zoom, which is stabilized. If I switch to 2x, which isn't stabilized on this device, you'll see it's much more shaky. If I go back to 1x, that's just stabilization on the phone. I didn't do any editing after this or anything to stabilize it. The iPhone 8 Plus does a pretty good job of stabilization just standing still. If I switch to the 2x camera, you can see much more shake like I showed before. But on 1x, it does a really good job, and this is just all stock settings using the stock microphone as well. I'm using the same place as I did for the Note 8 review and thought we'd check autofocus here as well. I'm focused on the sign on the left, and then we'll focus on the tree. And it seems to switch really quickly and smoothly. The third good thing about the iPhone 8 and especially 8 Plus is its battery life. I easily get through a day, probably a day and a half to 2 days without any problem. With my normal use that I had on my 7 Plus, this time around I achieve from unplugging it at 6 a.m., plugging it back in at midnight, I get a full day's use with about 50% battery life left. I'm not sure how Apple does it, but on this phone, it's pretty impressive. And the next thing is the iPhone 8, 8 Plus, and the iPhone 10's ability to use wireless charging. This is something we've seen on the Android side for quite some time, and it's been a long time coming to the iPhone 8, 8 Plus, and 10. Now, the wireless charging isn't terribly fast, but it's just super convenient. It charges basically at the same rate as the wall adapter that's included. A little bit later on, it will charge somewhere between the wall adapter included and the iPad charger, but its convenience makes it just really the best way to charge the phone, in my opinion. The final positive is the A11 Bionic chip. The speed of the 8 Plus is just unbelievably fast and really benchmarks along the lines of a MacBook Pro. While those are mostly numbers at this point, when you're crunching 4K video, it's unbelievable how fast it is. There is a little bit of lag and stutter from time to time, and it's not really something I think Apple's worked out with iOS itself. But when you open camera apps, you've moved from app to app, everything's just incredibly quick, and it never feels slow at any point whatsoever. The first negative for most people will be the glass back. Now, I personally like the glass back. It makes it feel a little bit nicer, but it's definitely going to be a pain for most people as it can shatter easily and makes the phone much more fragile. Now, the next thing is it's very, very slippery. I place it down, it just slides around. I actually find it slides on just about every surface, and as you can see down here, there's actually a little nut that I put there to keep it from sliding past that point. So it's something that's kind of a pain if you're not using a case. The third bad thing or negative about this phone is the design. It's 4 generations old. Now, some people really like this design, but I'm kind of on the side where I think it's very dated and just seems like something we've seen before. Now, it is a refinement of that design, and the back is really the only way to differentiate the current designs with the glass back and the 3 different colors that we get with it. Other than that, there's not a whole lot new. And that leads to the next bad or negative point, and that has to do with the size of the bezels. Because it's the same kind of classic design at this point, the bezels just look giant compared to the other modern smartphones out there. They make room for the home button on the bottom. The side bezels aren't too big, but the top bezel is also very large compared to the competitors out there. And the competitors have some really nice looking phones that are really a much smaller form factor, but with a larger screen because they're able to shrink the bezels. Now, this will be fixed in the iPhone 10, but with this one, you don't get that advantage. There's 2 final negatives about the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus. The bad things about them are pretty simple. One is you won't have the latest and greatest phone in about a month. And the next one is it's very expensive. The price of this phone has not gone down, and you only have 2 choices. So now you have a 64 gigabyte model and a 256 gigabyte model. There's nothing less expensive unless you want to go with older models, and Apple continues to carry the iPhone 6S, 7S, and their larger counterparts, and also the 8, plus the iPhone SE. So you've got a big choice there, but you won't have the latest phone, and then also the iPhone 10 when that comes out. So you've got a huge price range, but in order to get the latest chipsets with the i11 Bionic or A11 Bionic chipset, you won't be able to get that without getting an 8 or 8 Plus or iPhone 10. And the price to do that is just very, very high and much more than you would think it should be at this point for something that's just a more refined design with not a huge change, at least aesthetically. That's it as far as the good and the bad for the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus. They're great devices, but if you're looking for the latest and greatest, hold off and get the iPhone 10 if you want to wait and pay that much for a phone. Otherwise, this is a great device if you don't mind the bezels, you don't mind the glass back, you want the wireless charging, the great camera, and the faster processor. This is the way to go. I can't say it's a bad phone, but for what it is, with the 10 right around the corner, it's a tough sell in my opinion. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe and like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.